Welcome to this session on knowledge workers. We couldn't find any knowledge workers, but we have a great panel to discuss this. But let's get into this right away. We've got here, first, this has been brought to you by the IMCCA. They're active on the show floor, and a number of the sessions here being brought to you by this incredible group that understands what we all aspire, not making a profit in communications and audiovisual. Okay. Yes. Okay, so with that, I should introduce myself. That'll probably take up the rest of this session here, so I'll try to go a little fast. My name is Dave Michaels. I am the principal analyst, whatever that means, at Talking Points. David is here from Talking Points as well. We publish industry research, we do media, we do podcasts on the show floor, which I'm sure will be riveting when I ever get the videos to David. We publish a monthly report called the Insider Report. Kevin, did you read it? I did. All right, good. Very good. Okay, there's an endorsement. I do a number of other things online, the real-time research with CIX2024. I do chats with David, publish on No Jitter, and lived here in Colorado 33 years, and I've still never been to Casa Bonita, the most famous restaurant in Colorado. But it's open again. It is open. All right. So things changed in the workplace. You know, this picture actually has computers on it, but they have pictures like this without computers. We have pictures like this with typewriters. They have pictures like this with carbon paper, with fax machines, all kinds of stuff. This type of office is sometimes referred to as a spreadsheet, and every person is a cell doing their little thing. And in fact, many people don't realize this. In the olden days, a job title that many of these type of people had was computer. And then guess who stole that title? The computer itself, that fiend. And we've been slowly adapting to new technologies as we go. That's the way things work. New technologies come about, we look at them and gosh, I remember when the PC came out, first it was on the CPA's desk, CFO's desk, CFO's desk, and then most of the accounting people got one, and then it slowly kind of propagated, and then it became just a standard issue. You got hired as a knowledge worker, you got a PC and you got a phone. Today, knowledge workers don't get phones, isn't that weird? They still usually get a computer, not necessarily a desktop, but they usually get some sort of computing device. But things change over time slowly, unless something happens that causes a rapid change. Oh my gosh. We had a pandemic. Did anyone notice that? We had a pandemic. We had a pandemic that it was, we all lived through it. Not everyone did, but we all did. And it didn't seem that big of a deal at the time. I mean, it was a big deal, don't get me wrong, but it didn't seem life-changing. It seemed like, okay, we'll get through it, and we'll be done. A lot of people thought it'd be a week, a lot of people thought it'd be a month, and it turned into years, but eventually it lifted, and we're all ready to get back to work, and this event is an example of getting back to events. And everything during the pandemic became online. It was a diabolical experiment that actually worked, and it was surprising how well it worked. No one thought that the communications industry would be able to do this, and in fact, it didn't at first. There were a lot of outages at places like Microsoft Teams and WebEx and Google. They weren't ready for the sudden spike in demand. Zoom, they all had outages at the beginning of the pandemic. They fixed that. But for the most part, we managed to keep business doors open through online activities. And it was actually it wasn't just the US, it was a global experiment, and it was actually quite successful, more so than many people realize. And so then, and I'm not sure exactly if anyone will agree with this. pandemic ended. I'm not sure if anyone will agree with that. I just heard people talking, I heard some of the panelists talking, did you get your COVID shot yet? So COVID's not gone, but the pandemic's mostly gone. Events like this are back, and planes are getting full again. And so we're mostly resuming to a new normal. And I think there was a lot of expectation during the pandemic that when the pandemic would end, that everything would go back to the way it was. And I think that didn't quite come true the way we expected. A lot of things changed. The term I've been using is the toothpaste isn't going back in the office again. And what happened was we began to understand that some of these things that we just always assumed to be true, like you have to go to work every day, may not be true. And our expectations as employees, as managers, as consumers, significantly changed. And I'm still running into this. I just had to deal with a bank issue this week, as a matter of fact, and it was a pretty simple thing. I had to get a letter from a bank, and they just really wanted me to come to the branch. And I'm like, I'm not coming to the branch together. We're talking on the phone, you validated my account, you could do this. And well, you really need to come in. And then she agreed, and then we hung up, and nothing happened, and I called back, and she said, oh, well, all the people came in the branch, and so they have priority. So why do they have priority? My expectations have changed, and I should not have to go to the bank. This very same bank, by the way, I had to wire money during the pandemic, and I'd never done that before. And they said, oh, sure, we could wire money. It's a very digital thing. Why not, online? And they said, all you have to do is go to the branch and fill out a form. But the branches were closed. And so there was no way to wire money at this bank because they hadn't thought this process through. So our expectations have definitely changed. My bank maybe not hasn't, but our expectations have definitely changed. And I think this is really important. And I really want to emphasize that our expectations have changed, not just as employees, but as a society. We expect a lot more to be accomplished online and remote than we ever have before, to the point that we really question, almost get angry when we can't. I've been hearing a lot of conversations about the upcoming election. Why do I have to go to a polling station? Why do I have to do this? Why can't I do this from the comfort of my home? And so if expectations have changed, that's going to cause a change in behaviors and policies. And we now have a new term which I hate. I do not like the word hybrid, and I think hybrid is a very confusing word. And so we use it for hybrid work, we use it for hybrid office, we use it for a lot of things. And every time we use it, it's because we don't have a better word. I really don't like the word hybrid. I actually looked up hybrid in the dictionary, and almost all the definitions have to do with breeding. And I don't think that's what they're talking about at the office. And so it's really not the right word to be using. But what we mean it as, when we use the word hybrid, we tend to mean some sort of combination between two norms. And a lot of people interpret it as the best of both worlds. I, because of who I am, often interpret it as the worst of both worlds. And I think it's very much a transition word. I don't think it's a goal. I don't think it's a destination. I think it's an accident. It's a transition. And I'll just use cars as a metaphor because we use the word hybrid a lot for cars. We know the past was all petrol cars. We have a likelihood that the future is all electric cars. But these transitions take time. And we have to build charging networks, we have to build battery technology, we have to build we have to figure out range, we have to figure out all kinds of things. And these transitions don't occur overnight. And so while all this stuff is happening, we have a hybrid car. And some people think it's the best of both worlds. I think it's the worst of both worlds. It's an electric car that needs to have oil changes and transmission changes and all that stuff. It's a most expensive car you can buy. It's all kinds of terrible things about a hybrid car. But if you happen to live in this place where I really want to spend less on petrol and I really have a long commute, I need it, it might fit those needs. So it does have a place. And so hybrid work is this combination that nobody really knows what it means. It's somehow accommodating in the office work and at home or remote work. It doesn't have to be at home. A lot of people for a living visit customers and travel. And so how do we redefine the office, the schedule around hybrid work? What does it even mean? And that's what we're going to discuss here. So, and I just also want to point out that everyone has an opinion on this, and everyone's opinion, other than mine, tends to be wrong. And so we really have to understand where they're coming from. So my son, who is 30, really wants an office. He really wants to go to work. And I'm like scratching my head. Why would you want an office? It doesn't make any sense. So people have different needs and expectations, which will come up here. Oh, that was the multi-generation. All right, let's get to the panel. So here's our panel. I have them seated in magical order so that you can read their name tags on the slides. And the first time you speak, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself a little bit. But we won't go through the whole introduction stage because I'll get bored. So with that, I'm going to start off with a question, and I'm going to direct it right to Michelle. Michelle, what is a knowledge worker?
I guess everybody's a knowledge worker if you, at one time.
You didn't
went to an
this
office.
first instruction was to introduce
I
yourself.
did not follow instructions either. Gosh, all that private school education. Hi, my name's Michelle Lorette. I currently work with ABC OIP. I have a background in integration, distribution, structured cabling, and I've worked directly for AV manufacturers and manufacturer rep firms. And I'm an AV tweep, so there's that.
So does this hybrid concept only apply to knowledge workers, and who are they?
Well, I mean, if you're a service worker, you can't do your job remotely because, you've got to work the cash register at the drive-through or whatever, at the dry cleaner or wherever you are providing an in-person service. So, yeah, it's really office workers. So that's who the knowledge.
Now I've seen some places that are having like a hotel front desk remote. And so is that a hybrid worker?
Those that choose to go that route, then this is where technology's gotten you give someone a tool, they automatically call it a hammer, everything's a nail. I've seen this in the apartment rental industry. They want everything to be through a stupid app. That's the worst customer service experience in the whole wide world. I find that the same. I really want a McDonald's worker behind the counter. I don't want to go to the kiosk. I also don't want to scan my own groceries. I want those people to have jobs. They do a good job. They're nice. We chit-chat. We build relationships. I've been going to the same grocery store for 20 years. I know all those kids and adults that work there, right? I don't want to scan stuff. I want to pay someone. I want them to have a job. So some stuff I don't think should be outsourced. I mean, it can. The bigger question is, should it? And why would we want it to? Because I've noticed even when I don't have an actual, waiter or waitress at a restaurant and I go to a counter and order, they now want me to tip the person that is already being paid by them to do a job that doesn't give any value to this. They're going to hand me my food no matter what. Now you want extra money? I mean, I kind of like the European model. There's just no tipping. We just pay people really good wages and it all comes out in the wash, right? I'm like, those Europeans are on to something. That's not a bad idea.
She's talking about you, Chris. What do you have to say? He's a European sometimes.
Well, it's funny.
You have to introduce yourself, Chris.
My name's Chris Netto. I'm Market Development Manager at Starin, and I do things online and hang out with people like yourself, right? So it's funny. I'm going to call you out. You calling these people knowledge workers is one thing. They were formerly office workers. I don't know where that stopped being cool. Like, right. Now they're knowledge workers. So, and there are people that take offense to that being called knowledge workers. Why would somebody who sweeps not be considered a knowledge worker? So it's kind of weird, that term. Where I am, and I agree with you, Michelle, there's certain things that I need a physical body person talking to me. I'm not good with finances. Please have somebody on the bank on the other line. I don't specialize in airline flights. If my flight's canceled, please help me figure out what's the best option to get from A to B, as opposed to me taking 5 steps to get there. So there are things that it's very much, there's a line in Jurassic Park that I use a lot, and it is, just because you think you should do it, did you really stop and think why, and do we really need it, right? They didn't need dinosaurs. We don't need some of this stuff, and you're right about, AV in general loves to throw technology at things. It will solve it, and that's what we do. Your panel's all AV people, more so than just specifically UC. We have a bad habit of, well, if it can't be fixed, just find a piece of technology that can go in and kind of make it happen. And that's the way of the future. This little device here solves a lot of problems that used to require thousands of them. And there's memes all over the internet about what this has replaced. And I love that. I can't live without it. To the point where, this is my office tool. It's funny, you showed a slide of that. You could have taken that picture in 1927. Obviously not, because there's computers. You could take that picture in 1980. That's the same office I started in 1998. Sat in that same cubicle with a hardwired PC, right? Pandemic hits. Problem number one that happened during the pandemic, we're not even talking about the Zooms and the Microsofts and the outages. Half the people that were sent home, their employers choose not to give them laptops. They had desktop PCs,
Yep.
Yeah.
clunkers.
Right.
They were shipping desktop PCs off their desks out, and desk chairs, right? They were not prepared.
So progressive.
This to us is what, like today, a laptop and a mobile phone is your office, anywhere.
Wes Keel, do you, oops, yikes, careful of this podium. Do you feel that it matters, if you're calling, Chris talked about get airline service, maybe I talked about hotel check-in, do you feel it matters if the person helping you is physically, if the airline reservations desk, if they're at their home, in their kitchen, or if they're at a call center, or if the front desk person is right in front of you or on a TV? Do you have an opinion on this? And introduce yourself.
I do. My name's Wes Keel West. I've been in the AV integration world for a long time, and currently just on the manufacturing side. It does make a difference. Sometimes when someone calls you from a call center, you can hear it because it sounds like they're in a convenience store or something. You can hear everyone else's conversation around them, behind them. Sometimes then you make an assumption that maybe you're calling out of the country because they have a strong accent of some type. But with all the background noise and all the churn behind you, it does make it more difficult. Also,
So you're saying that they're in a call center, it's worse?
I think it's worse.
You want them to be at home? Would you be offended by a dog barking in the background?
No, I'd rather dog barking, and if I'm on video, I'd rather see their cat jump across their keyboard than hear 15 people in the
Oh, she
background.
says that now. Wait till her record gets deleted, yeah. But
But also, I agree with what Chris said. I also want that person to help me through this process. If I could do it easily on an app from a phone, they wouldn't need the person to answer the phone. They wouldn't need that knowledge worker. I want someone to help me through the process, to make it more pleasant, to make good use of my time as well, because I'm their customer. Customers, maybe not always right, but close. So I'd like them to help me, their customer, with the best experience that there is. And I think that most often includes a real person.
Lainey, I don't know you well enough to know whether you have staff or not. Do you have staff?
I do. I have staff. My name is Lainey Mataris. I've been in the industry for 30 years. First worked at Crestron, then a manufacturing rep firm, and now at Planar.
So do you require your staff to be in the office?
No, all my staff is remote and spread throughout the U.S.
That's crazy. You can't supervise them. You don't know what they're doing. They could be wasting time. How do you?
So part of being a knowledge worker, office worker, or a responsible adult in the industry, you need to do your job. And if you're not performing, there are ways to gauge that you're not performing. And I think that the days of somebody having to sit at a desk for 8 hours and consider that that's a full day's work is over. I have engineers that wake up early, do work, maybe take an hour in the middle of the day to run an errand, but they are no less productive than a person who sits behind a desk for 8 hours at their computer taking coffee breaks.
The
when they have
problem
to.
is it's hard to measure productivity in knowledge work. It's easy to do it in factory work. How many widgets did you build today? But in knowledge work, how many ideas did you have today is really kind of hard. It looks like you've got a thought on that, Michelle.
It is, and unfortunately, with all the tools they have, they've all become hammers, everything's a nail. I was the employee, I loved going to an office. I can crush anyone's productivity. I love to talk, I love to connect with people. I mean, I'll come up to your desk, oh, hey, Mr. Engineer, you busy? Oh, let's talk about this. And I'll kill an hour of your time, and you've got a deadline, you know. So being in the office is fun for a social person like myself that's in sales, and, you know, that was my problem is when I worked in integration, I was used to being a remote worker already, coming from the structured cabling industry. And so I had worked from home for like 8 years before that. And they were like, oh, no, you have to be here 8 to 5 every day. You know, like we had to sign in and sign out even if we went to lunch, and it could not be more than an hour. And they were obsessed with this. You couldn't go out and just cold call because you were only allowed to leave if you had an appointment, which I thought was adorable. So the minute anyone said, well, I'll meet with you, I'm like, great, I can come right now. And they're like, no, you don't have to drop everything. And I'm like, no, I do, because I'm not allowed to leave unless I have a meeting. So our meeting is going to be in 20 minutes. I can be to your office, right? It is so interesting. The end results, that's how you measure productivity. I had one company I worked for, they were like, we want you to send out bulk emails. And I was like, I don't need to do that. And they go, why not? And I said, telephones, because I know how to use a phone. I'm a Gen Xer. I came from analog. I know analog and digital. Fancy that. These days, the generations below mine, they get offended if you don't schedule a phone call with them. They won't answer because they're like, what's up with that? Why didn't you send me a text? Because we needed to talk on the phone. I don't want to do 53 texts. I want to have a 3-minute phone call and accomplish the same thing and not have any misunderstanding.
So I'm gonna split my question. I got a question about, you know, advice to making hybrid work, but I'm gonna split it into what not to do and then get into some what to do. So I'll just throw out there who wants to answer this. What are some of the things what not to do if you're implementing a hybrid work setup?
Don't micromanage people, hire adults. I would start there.
So you're an ageist. You only want to hire people over a certain age.
I like a really diverse workforce from age, background, you name it. When I worked in distribution, my favorite coworker and teammate was born after I graduated high school, which I thought was hilarious. And we were like the dynamic duo. He was a security expert. I was the AV pro. He was like a little sponge. I had dabbled in security earlier in my life. I learned a lot from him. He knew how the company worked. We were rock stars. And he was a kid.
So when you say hire adults, you don't mean a certain age.
No, I mean people that practice adulting, and that.
We'll get back to the breeding now.
That's
We're
not
back to
the
breeding.
physical
Okay.
age.
Okay, Chris, you reached for the mic there.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have reached for the mic. You know, during the time of the pandemic, we all threw around a word called empathy, right?
Empathy?
Yes.
I don't care about empathy.
I know you don't. You're not the most empathetic person right now. You're not going to like what I have to say. But what it is that during the pandemic, empathy was a thing. Why? You had to be sensitive towards the way people were, what people's situations were. So 3 years later, we lost that. We're not allowed to be empathetic anymore. It's wild. It's awesome. You were empathetic. What happened? What happened was the people that were running things, who needed to be in the office, whose job was to look at what other people were doing.
Right.
Supervisors, right? I think what needs to be addressed is that management in business has changed. Work is work regardless of where you do it and what you do. It's the same. I'm a business developer. You can call me a market developer. You can call me whatever. That job has been around for years. Years. We just called it different things. So having empathy, understanding people's situations has gone wayside, right? If an employee who is a single mom who has children needs to go pick up their kids at a certain time and have been doing it for the last 3 years because that's the way the pandemic has changed it, now you are going to decide that that's not right? As an employer, that's not your business, right? Your business is that person has been a solid worker, stuck with you when they could have probably taken double when everybody was kind of doing this like job shift years ago, 3 years ago, right? Everybody was moving around, and what happened to that? Now it's flipped. Now the employers have the power, and now all those people are in a bad situation, right? So the ones that stuck with you, how's the reward system going, right? So empathy, I think, is something that was lost in this process. We were very empathetic before because of people's situations. Why has it changed, right? The technology has gotten better, so you should be better to understand that, you know what, if you want to measure a person's productivity by button clicks or by mouse clicks or by whatever stupid thing that we can come up with to make it seem like you're working, you work. You work. I work on weekends. You know, and nobody tells me. I'm not punching a clock on Sundays.
I measure productivity by backspaces. Weskio, you got some advice? I just realized I'm in a room full of AV professionals. I put you in the right order, but the slide's backwards. No AV professional spoke up. We could never find one when you need one. Okay, so.
Donto caught that, but the ship had already sailed.
Okay.
Allowing people to work their own schedule that works for their lifestyle, I think has been somewhat of a new, since the pandemic. Because they're not in an office, they're not 8 to 5, they are working the weekends, they are working after the kids are in bed, or they are working at 4 a.m. Maybe they're working, with a customer who's not in the United States, so they're working off time to accommodate that time frame. And Chris is right. We do have better tools now. You have your phone, you have your laptop, you can work from anywhere. And I think that management has been struggling with that. They've been struggling with how do we measure it? And if you're not at your desk, or you don't have a click, or we can't measure it in some quantifiable method, how do we know that you're actually working? Well, because you're getting the work done, and your customers love you, or your coworkers love you, and maybe you're not in the office, so you don't have that personal. We've lost a little more of that personal relationship, I think, with our coworkers, because everything's on a Zoom call or a Teams call versus stopping by their desk and just having a conversation. So that's part, I think, what I miss about the office environment is just having that tangible relationship with people versus seeing them on a laptop screen every few days. So I think that that's one of the things that we've had to teach management is that you've got to look outside of these just very basic supervisor metrics and be an actual leader in your company and realize that people deserve and have earned the right to work at odd hours or work around their kids' appointments or to trust them to adult where before we trusted them to punch a card and be there by a certain time. It's very different, I believe.
Lainey, she's touching on supervisor tools, monitoring tools. Now, there's a gray area between productivity tools and spying and micromanaging employees. You have any thoughts on that topic?
I think that if you have to have monitoring tools on keystrokes and mouse movements, then that you don't get the picture of what the person is that you hired. And I think that is it sets the tone for a negative relationship, personally. And I also think that during the pandemic, the companies didn't actually change their process and procedure on how to work with hybrid workers. And we're doing a session on digital signage in a few hours, and how many companies actually modified how they communicate to the workers who are in the office and the workers who are not in the office. How many companies developed an intranet where they're pushing the same communication messages to them, the hybrid workers, as the ones that are in the office. How many people have actually adjusted to include them in the company picnic? People are remote now. They can't go to a physical company picnic. What are you doing for the people who are remote? What's their virtual picnic? So I think that if you don't lean in and say, as a company, I am going to modify my behavior and make you all feel inclusive in my communications to you, and you monitor keystrokes, then you're setting yourself up for a disaster, and you're not going to be a successful company.
So you touched on the company picnic, and I have an opinion about watermelon too. But the question, that was where we failed during the pandemic. You know, we nailed online meetings. We nailed it. But a lot of things that fall into this cultural propagation or meeting colleagues, and more social, the company bowling league, things like that, all kind of died during the pandemic. And so now we're with this hybrid work. Nobody's quite sure how to set that up, how to restore that.
Make one comment to that. I started 5 years ago at Planar. The pandemic hit. I had my first dinner with my colleagues as a group yesterday.
And you realize you made a mistake joining this company, I bet.
Because I went to a trade show, when the world opened up, I went to a trade show, I took out customers, and I took out more customers, and I have to see customers. But then I forgot, wow, there's a whole group of employees that I didn't even meet and socialize with. And yesterday I broke bread with 6 of them, and I said, I cannot believe this is the first dinner with Planar employees that I've ever had, outside of a traditional sales meeting. So I think that we all have to lean into adjusting ourselves to the new world, because we were isolated for 2 years. And so now we have to relearn the process of empathy. We have to relearn the process of looking at your coworkers and saying, wow, what did you do this weekend? Not, how did you produce more for the company? And I think that we have to retrain ourselves.
I will say that that is so true and accurate, and you always have really good points like that, Lainey. I appreciate that. But yeah, we do have to retrain ourselves, and we also have to understand that we have a shared PTSD. You know, the world didn't go through anything like this since like the 20s, and it's a thing, and change is hard, especially AV. I mean, I learned about the analog sunset in 2010. Yeah, it had already been around for a decade, y'all. That stuff didn't sunset till literally 2023. I'm like, VGA was still around in 2023, being specified and installed.
I still have VGA.
Of course you do, you
Yeah.
traditionalist. You know, but a lot has changed. You know, being in person is meaningful, but being a remote employee doesn't make you any less of an employee. You know, but in order, when you get people together, it just needs to be for a meaningful purpose, not just for the sake of seeing their face, right? It's got to be worth your time, their time, everybody's time. That's what makes the world go around. So that would be something you should do, not something you shouldn't.
Well, let's focus on what you should do. I'm going to go down the line, starting with Chris, because we're going to go in reverse order of the. Chris, give us some sound advice, wisdom, the wisdom of your years of that gray hair.
Every single one of them earned in AV. Every single one of the gray hairs. My advice would be to step away from the everyday conversations that we are privy to. Thank you. What I mean by that, if you're going to only learn within your little inner circle, you're not going to learn much. So step out of what your comfort zone is. And what I mean by that is there are things that you can do to improve yourself. During the pandemic, I had a crushing moment. Like, I could not be out with customers. I thrive at a trade show. I'm not going to be at a trade show for a year, 2 years, 3 years. I don't know what to do with myself. So what did I do? I hit the books. I became smarter. I became certified. I also became, well, yeah, I guess the smarter could be, I never take any tests, so maybe we'll figure that out. But at some point, I have been in video for a very long time. My first job out of college, I sat in front of a Sony at the time, had a video conferencing system, and I would play with that and connect to test calls. That's all I did. Why did I say that? Get comfortable with video. I think that the best advice I could tell people that even though we're not in a pandemic, learning and being confident to sit in front of a video screen and present confidently and talk as if you do it in person every day. Changing how I did video was a big part of the pandemic for me. I changed my camera, I made it better, I got better lighting. I went back to my roots of school as a broadcast major, lit up the back of my office and changed my camera out, put a mirrorless camera. I went the extra mile because when there was 10 pictures in a Brady Bunch, well, I'm dating myself. When there was 10 pictures up on screen, mine stood out. And it's not because of me, but because I had proper lighting, proper all that stuff. And it's not hard. You don't have to take a class in this. So get comfortable with video because I do believe video first is the way to go. The generation that's coming up, and we haven't really stepped into the generation, and we're probably all of the same generation, well, maybe older. But the generation that's coming up does not want to read an email. Barely wants to make a text. If I have to talk to my 22-year-old son, it's got to go through Snap, and I hate that application. So there are things that are changing in the world that we have to adapt to, and I know that's hard, like VGA. It's painful for us to get away from our mac and cheese. We're comfort food in AV. Right. We will eat that until we can't eat it no more. But we sell video. We sell video conferencing, yet we won't use it.
I think that's great advice. I want to add to it something that I've been coached on lately. It's not just your camera and your background and stuff like that, but learning to look in the camera. I find that really hard. I'm not used to that. What's Gil?
I can actually add to that. It's not necessarily it's where the camera's being placed, right? USB manufacturers make them, you put them right on top of your laptop or top of your camera. That's all we know because it's there. There are mounts and small companies that make these little crazy little mounts that put it at eye level. And you're 100% right. One of the first things I did when I started looking into video was how I can get a camera that was in my eye line as opposed to looking up.
Yeah.
And every young person who takes a selfie will tell you, you can angle up a little more and it does this. If you angle to the side, it looks a little different. The kids. And the sad part is, of all this stuff, of all the classes and all the things I did, going to YouTube and learning how to set up a streaming thing from some 18-year-old who does it out of their mom's basement is my source of knowledge. Because there was no AV company out there saying, this is how you get a better video. All we wanted to do was to say, hey, use this camera, brand X. Awesome, great. Not what I'm looking for. Somebody please help me.
All right, let's wrap this up. With Gil? Sure.
I think the design community needs to understand that it's not about the foosball table. You know, people are not coming back for the foosball table and the snacks and you've got to give them, that's right, or the poof chairs. So I think the reason that people are coming back to the office, if that's really a company's goal, is to have people come back even from a part-time part of the week standpoint, is they need to give people tools that they feel like they can't get at home. Whether that's collaboration tools, that's what we all do, whether those tools are much better tools than you have at home, but also they have to adapt for the many. The reason that you're going into the office is for that social impact or the team impact. You're going in to be surrounded by people. That's typically the reason you're going back into the office. So if you're not giving them tools that make that truly collaborative, not just a Teams call, that's not truly collaboration. But if you're not making those environments truly collaborative, they're not going to come back into the office because they honestly don't see the value. And even if you are in the office, you can call someone that's in the office right next to you versus walking 15 feet to go talk to them. So I think the design community needs to realize that the picture that you showed up there from the 80s is not the current working framework for knowledge workers today.
Lainey?
So I'm going to take a different angle and go back to that hybrid work and how to make it successful from the perspective of both the person working hybrid and the employer. And I think that if you want this remote job to really work out, you have to lean in and be professional. Turn your camera on during meetings. Make sure that you're properly prepared for any type of meeting, whether it's the way you dress, how your environment looks, as Chris said, your lighting, your camera, be professional in the remote office. Don't make the convenience of being home obvious to the outside world. And I think from
So
employers,
slippers are okay.
I mean, everybody jokes about it, like, oh, business on the top, sweatpants on the bottom, right? Yeah, that's okay every now and then, but you want to be the person hybrid that you want to be professionally. And I think you also need to, if you're going to work from home, you need to start to track your own success. Like, how do you advocate for yourself if your boss doesn't see you every day? So make sure that you know what your successful things that you've done for that quarter, that month, that week is known. Advocate for yourself. Set up meetings, Zoom meetings with your boss. Lean into volunteering, lean into mentoring, lean into the industry that you're in, whether it's at a trade show or virtually. So that's what I would say from a person who's in the hybrid situation.
He
And
says
from an
walk away, she says lean in. So.
Yeah, and I think from an employer standpoint, I think we all have to look at who's working in HR, who's working in communications and marketing, and do they have the tools to address a hybrid and an in-office staff? And if they don't have the tools, either go out and get people hired to do that, or subcontract that work out to become better at it. And I think if you're not communicating to both the hybrid person and the office worker, then you're not going to be successful.
Okay, Michelle, we started with you. Finish it up.
It's so hard to follow Lainey because she's so good, right?
That's why I'm not over it.
Yeah, no, I like it. Great panel, really enjoyed this. We do need to just learn how to embrace the right tools, make sure we're including people. Good point. I always had my camera on when I went to work for a distributor because I didn't know anyone on my team, and it was a ginormous team. How are they going to get to know me? I'm going to have my camera on. I'm always going to be dressed to the nines because I can be a schlumpadinka on the weekends, right? But, if I'm at work, I'm overdressing. Right? I'm dressing for the job that I don't want because I never want my boss's job. I only want to manage myself. But, it's still that impression, that first impression. There's a great opportunity. I do feel poorly for people that work for, like, Jamie Dimon, who's like, you've got to be here. No, you don't. That's so old-fashioned. And this is from somebody who has a CPU and an AOL address. It's old-fashioned. Stop. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. Yeah, we didn't really get into that. I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of employers have made very strict policies. I just wanted to kind of point out that those have been going on for years. I mean, it was when Yahoo, when what's her name came into Yahoo and she got rid of teleworking. That was way pre-pandemic. I mean, that was a long time ago. So there's lots of reasons why managers may do that, which have nothing to do with hybrid work. It might have to do with reorganization or cultural development or a way of doing a soft layoff. There's lots of reasons, and those are almost separate from hybrid work conversations.
Yes.
But okay, so I want to wrap this up. I want to thank audience for your participation and your perseverance. And with that, we'll end this up. Thank you. Sure. Bring the house lights on.
Yeah.
Do you think there's too many certifications that are blocking knowledge?
Too many, I'm sorry.
Certifications? No,
You gotta get certified.
no. How else are you gonna prove yourself? And I'm a weirdo when it comes to certs.
You didn't take the test.
What's that?
You didn't take the test.
No, I don't
He's
take the test.
certifiable.
I am certifiably, so I'm definitely certified in something. But I'm a believer in certifications. Now, if you're talking about like high-end certifications, and maybe I should use a microphone, and I'm not certified to use that. All right. When you're talking about high-end certifications like a CCNA or to go for some sort of like Microsoft training that requires months and maybe a year of that, that's kind of out there. But what I do believe in is that there are things that you can take if it's manufacturer's training or if it is some sort of a VIXA-based training or any type of training that's out there that will move you ahead, right? It's getting harder and harder to prove for us that, the whole point of this conversation was that the remote worker has to prove that that they're doing stuff or that they're productive, right? I took a lot of time in a pandemic to study. I'd have 2 computers running at one point just to listen and learn, and I was taking classes that had nothing to do with things I do. I took a photography class because I wanted to use a camera. Turned out it was the best thing I could do because it actually helped me when I have to sell USB or PTZ cameras, because I understand now things that make up a camera. So certifications is great. It is for your personal development. And you have that piece of paper in your hand and your employer cannot take that away. That's where I believe certifications come into it. So, and that can go from the knowledge worker that we called, or if it's a sanitation worker who has got some certification on hazmat, whatever that is, I believe in that. I believe that that's the only way that if me and you were competing for a job in a very tight market, it's supposed to separate us. And sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't. And the biggest one out there is the college degree. I have 2 kids currently in college. And I am so crossed as far as what's the value of a college degree going higher. Every kid was coming out in the last 5 years, every kid was coming out with a master's because they took a 5 years master's, right? That wasn't even offered in the 90s when I went to school, right? And how are you supposed to compete that? I'll tell you how we compete. AV doesn't they don't participate in it. You say to somebody in AV that you have your master's, they're like, great, awesome. Here's your salary, and here's a bucket of tools.
The association doesn't make any money when you get a master's. He only makes money when he sells you worthless certification.
Yeah, well,
Are we still being?
we're still,
Yeah, video's still on there. Take that out.
Shots fired,
I'm ducking.
incoming.
Nope, he's not the only one without opinion.
no. Who let that guy in the room?
We've also hit a point right now where there are a lot of manufacturers and platforms and resellers creating certifications and forcing their employees to take them so that they can post that they took them on social media. So when you see 50 people have taken my company's certification on what AI is, hey, I better take that certification as well. Look at all the people in my network doing it.
FOMO's a
Become
real thing.
social thing and a way for advertising. And I'm very opposed to that.
I wish I had time to have done the certifications. I didn't do that.
But I'm
I
nuts.
did. No,
Like-
I think there's a lot of people, and you mentioned PTSD on the PTSD, right? I was a salesperson. A salesperson doesn't get paid on certs. They get paid on maintaining a certain level of money coming into the company. And I think that while it's great to get certifications, I think it's also should be respected by a company that there's people who had to lean in and try to find different avenues of getting business development done
Do you
virtually.
think people can people advance based on creativity?
Totally. But I think our industry has a hard time looking at people like you, Chris. Like, what you do for the industry is immeasurable. Like, you can't.
There's got to be a spreadsheet for it. or
You
else it doesn't-
have.
No, no, it's truly
But-
immeasurable.
but-
We've been
no,
trying.
No, but what I'm trying to say is, many people in the industry who had no path of where they wanted to go went to AV in the AM and started learning things about the industry that they had no idea about. And that could have moved them into a different direction, whether it's an inside salesperson saying, hey, I like technical sales. I'm going to do that because Joe on AV in the AM was talking about it. And I think that what you do, you can't measure that. But if I have a cert and say, okay, I'm Microsoft certified, okay, great. So there are 50 other people that were made to take that certification. But to do what you do, I want to learn from that. And where's my cert? Like, how do I get a Chris Netto
And
certification?
where's the street credibility? Where's the
Where's the
behind
AV
it?
and the AM certification?
Yeah.
I've already
We're working on
passed it.
Nancy. We're
I've already
working on
It's in
passed
the
it.
shop. We can go get the T-shirt and
Yeah.
and
That's it.
And I would argue that many people that end up in AV didn't plan to start there. They started somewhere else, and they came into audiovisual through multiple paths. It's always a fascinating story when you get people around with a couple of drinks and find out, how did you get into AV? So many times, we all got, my degree's in interior design. I started with David at Lehman Brothers. I was in, construction management. So I think a lot of people got degrees for the career they thought they would have. That didn't work out for some reason, and now they're in audiovisual. And so we all come in with these degrees that maybe help us out, but certifications certainly are a differentiator.
I can also say, I spent 13 years on site with 3 different pharmaceuticals. They were all big on the Six Sigma conversation. When I left that world and got into AV and I said, hey, I'm a Six Sigma green belt or a yellow belt. I was yellow belt because I could not run projects. I was certified to work on the projects. Six Sigma yellow belt in AV meant nothing when I got into it. They were like, what's that? Is that like a karate thing? I'm like, no, it's lean. Oh, lean, we understand lean. Do more with less? No, there's other versions of it, and this is the proper way to kind of do a project. So I do have worthless certifications, and I admit I have those too, but I have it and you don't, and I'm going to highlight that. I'm competitive when it comes to job.
If I could, please, just to add to my comment earlier, I don't think the learning is invaluable in certifications. I have a CTSI. I learned things when I got it. Obviously, I had my CTS first. I learned things when I got it. I've got another manufacturer. So I think the knowledge is valuable. The challenge is when you're in situations like David described with the kind of pumped up one, or when it's you have an industry certification that isn't marketed to anyone. I challenge any of you to go to 10 architects and ask them what a CTS is. And if you get one who right off the bat says, oh yeah, an AV specialist, I would drop dead in the street. They just don't know. There's no marketing on it.
I challenge you to an MMA AV competition.
Ooh.
You're not in it.
You need gloves.
I have a little bit of everything behind me, dude. That is multiple forms of AV behind it.
No,
And
but
the
that's a
way I
good
look at it.
point. And my husband is an RCDD, a really clever data dude in the ITS world. All the architects know what an RCDD is. They're not a structural engineer, but they still have a stamp that means something. And for some reason, Big C knows how to market this, but somehow we can't figure this out after 40 years. Okay.
Are there any other questions from our esteemed audience? I could do shadow puppets with my laser. Okay, well then, once again, we will wrap up this session. Thank you so much.